I know that we have been working our way through Daniel, and especially the last few weeks we have been, I would say, struggling, battering our way through Daniel 11. Um, Before I go on, let me just hear what Sister Susan has to say. Go ahead, Sister Susan.
Sorry, Brother David. Something crossed my mind this week about Daniel and Revelation. Daniel speaks about the abomination of desolation, but that's not mentioned in Revelation. So what would be the equivalent if there is even one in Revelation to the abomination of desolation?
I believe it is a mark of the beast, Sister Susan.
That's what I was thinking too, but then okay, I'll go with that for now. give it some more thought. That's what I was thinking too, but something threw me off that was in Daniel that I thought the mark would have been separate from the abomination of desolation, but I will read it
All right.
again.
Um, we should and we will take one of these afternoons to talk about the abomination of desolation. But I will just say quickly that the abomination of desolation is mentioned directly about 3 times in the book of Daniel and indirectly another time. So about 4 times we have it mentioned in the book of Daniel. So one of the things that we need to take careful note of is that the abomination of desolation, it emerges about 3 different times. So if you look at the book of Daniel and you look at one reference, you might not see where it can fit the mark of the beast. But remember, Jesus said, when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, and he was referring to the destruction of Jerusalem. So one of those places where it talks about the abomination of desolation is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Jesus applied it that way. And yet there are some times when it is mentioned, when it is clear it is not speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem. So it applies more than once. That's one of the keys to understanding it. So the final abomination, the final application is really at the time of the end, and it has to do with the mark of the beast. That's my conclusion after having studied the topic, Sister Susan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So anyway, as I was saying, we've been trying to go through and to especially sort out some of the issues with chapter 11 and chapter 10. If I'm perfectly honest, the more I study Daniel 8 to 12, the more I am not absolutely certain as I used to be. And what I want to do this evening, I just want to take us to look at what it says on certain things and just show you why some of the things that we have taken for granted or that we have accepted as factual, there are some question marks. There are some question marks. Um, I'll just go ahead and go to the book and we will look at what I'm trying to say. I'll show you what I'm looking at and why the challenges are there. And hopefully, not hopefully, absolutely, certainly, God is going to help us to understand. But it may not all be at one moment, at one time. It will take a while. And I think these studies are a part of the process. So I just want to say, I want to continue to make the disclaimer. What we are looking at in this part of our study, I don't want anybody to put it in stone because we are exploring rather than being dogmatic. All right, and I hope that is okay. If you want dogmatic studies, you'll find it in the Adventist Church. You'll find it in some other places. They're all over YouTube. People come out with absolute certainty and they know exactly what it means. I will tell you that I don't have that kind of certainty about these prophecies. What I'm going to do this evening is show you the reasons why everything is not so clear to me. All right? Moto, go ahead.
Yeah, Brother Davis, I'm on the
Okay.
road. Yeah, so a couple of thoughts that came to me. Jenny and I were talking this week about um some of
All
these
right.
prophecies.
Your audio is not the best. Maybe if you speak a little more close to the mic.
Yeah, I'm driving, so I don't know which
Oh,
mode to
okay.
use.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I tell you what, give me a few minutes, I'll come back. I will come back. I'm just about driving now. I'll get onto my laptop and then I'll make my point.
That will be better.
All right.
All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and then I will try to explain what it is that I am talking about. All right. So the first thing I want to do is go to Daniel chapter 12 and to point out something. I believe that this is one of the places that causes me to have questions about several things. If you look at Daniel 12, remember last week I said we would try to start studying from the back forwards. So I'm going to start at the back. This is the last point, or almost the last point that I can go to establish a marker. Look at what he says in verse 7. In verse 7, Daniel says, and I heard the man clothed. All right, let me start from verse 6. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? So, the man standing on the river, we understand to be Michael. At least I believe it's Michael. And there's an angel standing at the side of the river. And he says to Michael, how long will it be to the end of these wonders? Now, there is nothing here that we should overlook. Every word is meaningful. So when he says these wonders, that is what his question is specifically about, these wonders. Now, there's nowhere else that talks about these wonders. So you have to use your own judgment to figure out, what is he talking about? What are these wonders? So the best you can do is go back and see what was said earlier on to find out what are these wonders. I know I commented on this last week, but I want to reinforce it because it's a very important point. The question concerns the end of something that is called these wonders. There are things that Daniel has been seeing that have been shown to Daniel, which are referred to as these wonders. That means they are kind of like unusual events. Okay? So, the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, that is Michael. Look at what he does. He holds up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven. This is not an ordinary answer that he's giving. He doesn't just say, well, it's going to be for a few weeks. It's going to be for 10 years. No. The answer is so striking and so strong and so decisive, and he wants the point to be made. So he lifts up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and he doesn't just give you an answer. He swears, I swear by the one who lives forever and ever. God is emphasizing this point in a very striking way. The question seems simple enough. How long? Till the end of these wonders. But the answer is so significant to heaven that he lifts up his both hands to heaven and he takes an oath. He swears by the Lord God Almighty that it will be for a time and times and half a time. So the time period is very, very strongly emphasized. God makes a big thing of it. He swears that it shall be for a time, times and a half. And look what it says now. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. It's difficult to look at this and not come to the conclusion that what we are looking at is the end of probationary time. If any of you can see it any different, if you see it different, not if you agree, if you see it differently, you're welcome to unmute and tell me why you think I am wrong. So the point I'm making is that the end of these wonders, it has to do with the close of the salvation time. It has to do with the time when the power of the holy people has been scattered. The he here, who is the he? I mean, it seems clear to me the he is the king of the north. He's the last power that we saw who was, if you go back to the previous chapter, that last power, the he, he's making war against the king of the south, and he goes out and he attacks different countries, and he sets up the tabernacle of his palace in the holy, in the beautiful country or the holy land or whatever. And then he comes to his end. And when it says he shall come to his end and none shall help him, that is like stepping forward to the end of the story. It doesn't mean that he immediately comes to his end. It's like you tell the story of the person and then you jump and say, what will be his final destiny? Well, his final destiny is he will come to his end and nobody will be there to help him. It doesn't mean that it's giving you the exact point when he comes to his end. And that's how it is with all the prophecies of Daniel. At the end point, the last power is destroyed by a divine hand. It's just giving you the end of the story. Every time you come to the end of those chapters, chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 11, it goes to the end of the story when it mentions the last power. And this is the last power. He scatters the power of the holy people. You want to examine all of this with a fine-tooth comb. What does it mean to scatter the power of the holy people? Does it mean that they no longer have any power to fight? Does it mean they no longer have any power to walk about? Does it mean what kind of power is this talking about? And if you say it refers to the time of the Jews, it would mean they no longer have any power to fight, to make war. But clearly, this is not about the time of the Jews. This is about the end of the world. Because if you go back up to the beginning of the chapter, it says, Michael will stand up at that time. Michael will stand up, and there will be a time of trouble such as never once since there was a nation, even to that same time. At that time, your people will be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. This is the end of time. Nobody with any rational thinking can believe it is talking about any other time. And to seal the deal, it says, many that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And in case you need any more, it says, they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. This is the end of the world. You can't have any question about this. This is not talking about the time of the Jews or the history of the Jews. This is the final event on this planet. It's in this context that the angel says, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? What can he be talking about? It's very clear. He's talking about the wonders that Daniel has been seeing. The king of the north attacking everybody and so on, and planting the tabernacles of his palace in the holy mountain. This is what he's talking about. And the angel says, Michael says it will be for 3.5 times. And the final event, the final thing that will happen is that the power of the holy people will be scattered. And at that time, all these things will be finished. Okay? I guess at that time you still have the resurrection to take place. You still have maybe the time of persecution may not be completely over, but everything that Daniel has been seeing is over. This, brothers and sisters, is not an event that takes place in the past. This is an event for the future. Daniel 12 is in the future. So, I wanted to emphasize that first, because there are some things we're going to look at now that are tied to what we are looking at in Daniel 12. They are connected. And that is why I'm saying there are some things that are difficult to reconcile, and I have questions. But anyway, Brother Ian, go ahead.
Yes, so yeah. So a couple of things came to my mind. As I tell you, Jenny, Lynn and I were talking this week, and some things came to my mind. We noticed that in chapter 11, the king of the north is not just from one king or one nation. You notice like it's morphing from country to country. Different places become the king of the north, right? And so as it comes down to the end, we have to recognize that it not necessarily have to be a European kingdom that becomes the king of the north, because it could easily be morphed into something like North America. And the next thing to consider is that in Revelation it speaks about the lamb like beast setting up an image to the beast. In other words, creating. And when it says an image to the beast, I've always thought of it as being something that it does, and then it makes the world to wander after the beast. But what if the image of the beast is really something that just behaves like the beast, rather than just than something else? So we see how North America has been moving. We see how the all of the thoughts that is happening. And one of the things that Jenny and I pointed out, when I spoke last week about, when I asked the question, do you think that the United States is going to go down and set up its kingdom, or set itself up in the glorious holy mountain? And when I look at the map, I noticed that there's the Mediterranean Sea, and then there's the Red Sea, a large sea, and right between there you have the Gaza Strip. And already we hear Trump saying that he wants to go down there and help the people and set it up as a good place to do business, and he wants to go down there and even name it after his place in Florida, his home in Florida. He wants to name it after it. So I just wondered how that might be able to fit. What if he goes down there and take over the Gaza Strip? What if Israel do all of this so that America can go down there and set up itself in that place? It would be something significant to look at. The other thing is, Brother David, World War II, and Hitler and what happened there. Where in chapter 11, in all of the history of all of this, does that show up? That's one question that came to my mind. Something we can think about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me quickly respond to
I have one other point to make after. Yeah.
Right. What you said earlier on. I think in Revelation, I agree with what you said about the King of the North being a kind of coalition, but I still believe that in Revelation, at least, the greater emphasis is on the Euro-Asian beast, because in Revelation 17, it's the beast that comes from the bottomless pit. It's the beast, the 10 horns that make war against the Lamb. And when you go to Revelation 19, it's the beast and the false prophet. Mm-hmm. So I don't believe in Revelation the false prophet really takes the priority or the precedence or the dominance. Mm-hmm. So I find it better to think that what we see in Daniel is a coalition, but it includes America and those powers that stand with America. So that's why I mentioned the global north versus the global south, because
right,
to get it to fit now, you'd look at the King of the North as a coalition.
Right. But I mean, you know who's really in the global north in terms of power and strength? It's
Sure,
really
I
North
understand.
America. So when I said North America, I should have said the global north, but led by the Americans. One other point to take into consideration is that we also have another prophecy, Daniel chapter 2, that gives us a overview of all of the powers of the earth, political powers, right down to the stone is cut out without hands. And we know that somewhere along the line, this King of the North, that comes to its end, has to fit down into the feet of iron and clay.
Yes, of course. So it's the final power. It's the final anti-God power. This is the King of the North.
Right.
To the second point,
Yeah.
this is a map of the Middle East, and if you look, there's Gaza right here. And if you can
Right.
see where my cursor is moving,
Oh, so it's right beside the Sea of Galilee then.
It's actually not the Sea of Galilee. That was a mistake. Galilee is just at the bump here. This is Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea, okay.
Right. So it's between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. So
Okay.
yeah, between the seas, Jerusalem, you notice, is right there, somewhere thereabouts as well.
Yes.
So it's right when it says between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, it's looking in this general area where you have like Jerusalem, and you mentioned the Gaza Strip. It's right in here, or not even there. It would be between the seas, so the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, somewhere in here
Right.
is what would be signified. So if you're looking at it literally, that would be where it would be.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we're in looking at Daniel 12. This is the thing that strikes me. When you're talking about the 3.5 times, times and a half, that times and a half will bring us to the time when the power of God's people is scattered. And all these things are finished. The 3.5 times brings us to all these things being finished, and the power of the holy people is scattered. That 3.5 times brings us to the end of these wonders, the things that we have been looking at in the end of Daniel 11. 3.5 times and it will be done. So I'm emphasizing this because, for most of our lives, my life, we have always understood the 3.5 times to refer to a time period that ended in 1798, which was more than 200 years ago. And if that is true, it would mean that all these things have been finished. These wonders have already come to an end. The power of the holy people has already been scattered. And all these things have been finished. We don't have anything to do but lie down and cross our legs and wait for the Lord to come. Because everything has been finished. The wonders are over. Everything has been finished. So that's the first thing that makes me say, okay. So right off, that times and a half, and applying it historically. If we're going to do this, we have to accept that the power of the holy people has been scattered and all these things have been finished. Now, for those of you who have not yet gone through our studies on the book of Revelation, I'm going to go to Revelation because I'm going to just go there briefly, because Revelation is it has a passage in there that is very strikingly similar. As a matter of fact, I could say, I would guarantee that this passage is talking about the same thing that Daniel 12 is talking about. You go to Revelation 11, and when you go to Revelation 11, not 11, 10, Revelation 10, you probably know the story. An angel comes down from heaven, and he has in his hand a little book that is open. All right, and he says that the angel stands upon the sea and upon the earth, and he lifts up his hand to heaven, and he does the exact same thing that Michael did in Daniel 12. He swears by him that liveth forever and ever, the same phrase, who created heaven and the things that are in, and the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and so on, that there should be time no longer. This one in Daniel says that it shall be for a times and a half. Now I believe it's the same angel who comes back in Revelation 10, and he does the same exact thing, and he swears that there will be time no longer. The time has come for the time period to end. And he tells you when the seventh angel begins to blow his trumpet, the mystery of God will be finished. Now look at what it says. The angel tells Daniel to take the little book which is open. And by the way, when you look at this little book which is open, what do you remember? You remember where the angel said to Daniel in Daniel 12, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed." Till when? Till the time of the end. So at the time of the end, this little book, and if there ever was a little book, it's a book of Daniel, right? It has 12 chapters, but it's tiny compared to the rest of books in the Bible. So this little book is open in Daniel 12, Daniel in Revelation 10. And so the book of Daniel was to be opened, and so we see it open here in Revelation 10. John goes to the angel and takes the book, and it is sweet in his mouth and bitter in his belly. And he says, the angel says to John, you must prophesy again before many peoples, nations, and tongues and kings. What are we looking at here? We are looking at a message to go to the whole world. This is the same as the three angels' messages in Revelation 14. There's a message to go to the whole world. Now, the point is, or one of the points is that, again, we were always made to understand that this is referring to what happened in 1844. The three angels' messages were given in 1844. And for the past 200 years, we have been preaching the three angels' message. But if you follow through at what we are reading, look at what it says. You must prophesy again. And so you go immediately over to chapter 11, because there are no chapter divisions in the original text of the Bible. You must prophesy again. And so in chapter 11, it continues. As soon as he gets the message, a rod is given to him, and he's told to rise and measure the temple of God. You are looking at judgment. When? At the time when the book of Daniel is open, right? And it says, don't measure the outer court, because it is given to the Gentiles, and they will trample down the holy city for 42 months, saying 3.5 years. And it says clearly, and I will give power to my two witnesses. There you see the power of the holy people. What did it say in Daniel? What did it say in Daniel? When he has accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. The power of the holy people. Here it explains better in Revelation, and God says, I will give power to my witnesses, and they will prophesy how long? Times and a half. 1260 days, 3.5 years, times and a half. 1 year, 2 years, half a year, 3.5 years. And it tells you about their ministry. They preach, they minister for 3.5 years, and then it says, when they have finished their testimony, 3.5 years later, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them. What did it say in Daniel? When he who? He, the king of the north, he, the beast from the bottomless pit, will accomplish to scatter the power of the holy people. The power of the holy people is the power of the Word of God and the power of the Spirit of God, the two witnesses. When these witnesses, the Spirit of God and the Word of God, working through God's people, when they have finished their testimony, their 3.5 years is up, then the beast makes war against them and overcomes them and kills them. The power of the holy people is scattered because the beast brings about a condition on the earth where the Word of God and the Spirit of God no longer has any power to convert anybody. We call it the close of probation. Some people refer to it as the end of grace. This condition comes upon the planet, and so the power of the holy people is scattered. And at that time, we come to the end of the wonders. At that time, we come to the time when all these things are finished. So, you compare these two passages, and it's very difficult not to see the graphic connection. But when you put them together, what we see is that the angel coming down from heaven and opening the book of Daniel seems to be just at the start of the 3.5 years. Now, I've explained it before, and I've said it was 1844, and I've said some other things I'm going to look at, okay? I've said it was 1844, but as I'm looking back at it, I'm thinking, it seems to be right at the beginning of the 3.5 years, which would mean that we still don't understand. The book of Daniel is still not properly opened, and we are still waiting for some better understanding of the book of Daniel. So, remember, I'm asking questions more than giving answers. Remember that. I'm safeguarding myself, all right? Brother Ian, go ahead.
Wasn't it 3.5 years that Jesus' ministry lasted for?
Yes.
So it seemed to me like this is a kind of a time period God is using here again to do something to bring a message to the world, lasting for the same 3.5 years.
Right, that point has been made that this is a mirror of the ministry of Christ. So it is Jesus again ministering for 3.5 years, this time through his people.
Yeah, but didn't Daniel prophesied that God would have had given his people 7 days or 7 years, and in the
Um,
midst of the
y-
week it would
yeah,
it
but
would
that we don't want to do that because it says he will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week.
Mhm.
In the midst of the week, he will cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So we don't want to say that you split the 1 week in half and you put a gap of 2,000 years in between.
No, I'm not going there. Something else I have in mind. I'm thinking, how long after these witnesses are killed? How long they stay dead in the streets for? And
3.5 days.
3.5 days.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I was just thinking about 3.5 years, and then it
No,
says
three
three
and a
and a
half
half
days.
days.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So we'll butter our way through that when you come back to Revelation. But at the
All
moment,
right.
I just wanted to make the comparison between Daniel
Just a
12 and
thought.
Revelation 10 and 11 because this kind of helps us to understand Daniel a little better. When you look at the striking connection between these two chapters, you realize that in Revelation 10 and 11, God opens up our understanding to what Daniel 12 is talking about. Now, having said all that, I want to show you, I want to go to I want to show you a few verses in in the book of Daniel where it talks about the time of the end. Just look at these verses and let's just discuss them together. But first of all, even before that, I want us to look at the phrase that is used here, Daniel 8 and verse 19. All right, look at this phrase. The angel says to Daniel, in Daniel 8, no, we're not even in Daniel 11, but look at Daniel 8. The angel comes, the angel says, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. I know we left Daniel 8 behind some time ago, but I'm going to go back to it this evening. What are we talking about? We're talking about the vision of the horn that magnified himself to the prince of the host, took away the daily, and cast down the place of his sanctuary. This horn. And then it says, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed or restored or vindicated or justified. Now this 2,300 days is one of the difficulties that people like you and me have in discussing this chapter, because it doesn't say days. It says on the 2,300 evenings and mornings. Evenings and mornings. It doesn't say days. What is interesting and what you should know is that this is the only place in the Bible that this phrase evenings and mornings is used to describe days. Anywhere else in the prophecy that you see days, in the prophecies you will see the word, I think it's the word yom. Yom means day. But God, for some reason that we don't fathom, He says evenings and mornings. And the only time in the Bible that evenings and mornings, this phrase, I think the phrase is Erek Boka. Erek Boka. The only time it is used to refer to days is in the book of Genesis, where it says that the evening and the morning were the first day, the evening and the morning were the second day. Where it talks about those days of creation, it says Erek Boka, evening and morning. So the book of Daniel here is the only other place where this phrase is used. So you ask, why would God say evenings and mornings? This is why people, they try to connect it to the evening and morning sacrifice. That's why a lot of the translations say the daily sacrifice, because they say, okay, there was a sacrifice offered in the morning, there was one offered in the evening. So when it says 2,300 evenings and mornings, it means 2,300 sacrifices. And that's how they interpret it. I'm going to show you why I absolutely repudiate that.
Could
All
it
right?
mean that these are literal days?
Well, that's what many people say. But if they are literal days, it's the only place where evening, morning is used to refer to literal days. Maybe there's something more to it. It could mean literal days. But it's one of those questions that is hanging in the air that I personally don't have a clear answer for. And I've been praying for understanding about it, okay? I don't think I've ever seen any explanation that makes complete sense.
Or it
It's
might have,
it's one of those mysteries that we can put in our brains and tag it there to do further examination.
or could it mean that it has dual applications?
It could, but asking the question is not helpful unless you have a definite way of explaining why. There are many things we can ask, could it mean?
I'm
You
just
understand
thinking
what I'm
because,
saying?
yeah, I'm just thinking because it says evening and mornings.
Right, it could. It could mean many things, but whatever suggestion we come up with, we should have a reason why we say this is what it means. Otherwise, we're just left with saying, could it be, could it be, could it be? And there are many things it could be. If you see what I'm saying. But let me show you something. Here is something that is relevant. It says, look at what it says now. There's an angel which says, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. And here's the thing. The angel says to Daniel, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. This vision of the evenings and the mornings applies to the time of the end. Now I just want to, before I go any further on this, you know, sometimes I'm a little forgetful. If I don't come back to this point, the vision, the 2300 days, please remind me. What I want to do first now is to show you what does the time of the end mean. Then we'll come back to that, right? So let me look at the time of the end. First of all, Daniel 8:17. We just looked at that. He came near to where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So the vision of the 2,300 days has to do with the end of time. It didn't have anything to do with offering of sacrifices. It had to do with something to happen at the end of time, the 2,300 days at the time of the end. And we are going to come back to this phrase, we are looking at this phrase, the time of the end. And I wanted to look at the things that happen at this time. As a matter of fact, there's something I should point out first. Let me point this out. All right? Daniel 8, verse 19. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. Look at what he says now. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. What does this mean? What does this tell you? At the time appointed, the end shall be. God is not working off a hit and miss system. Some time ago, I did a presentation entitled God and Time. One of the things that I try to share is that this idea we have that God is waiting on us, or that time could have ended already, is not biblical. It's not scriptural. And this emphasis here further reinforces it. God says at the time appointed. God has appointed a time when things will happen, and when that appointed time comes, it will take place. You cannot change it, you cannot adjust it, you cannot speed it up, you cannot slow it down. Just like how Jesus came in the fullness of time. So the end shall be at the time appointed. God has appointed a time for the end. And I'm studying the prophecies. But you know when it says the book of Daniel will be opened? At the time of the end. But maybe because I am so fixated on it, maybe it is the time of the end. Because the Lord says, many will run to and fro at the time of the end, and knowledge shall be increased. So maybe we are a part of that experience, right? But what I'm saying is that don't indulge in the fallacy of believing that the work of God is dependent on the whims of human beings. No. At the time appointed, the end shall be. And I want you to notice, it doesn't say it one time. If you look at Daniel 10 and verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true. He's talking about the vision of Daniel 11. This is the introduction. But the time appointed was long. Daniel understood that the appointed time was long, far in the future. And he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. So again, he emphasizes that there's a time appointed. Even as we go through Daniel 11, remember, there's a time appointed, and the whole chapter is leading you to what happens down near the end of that vision. But there's an appointed time. If you look at Daniel 11 and verse 27, it mentions the time again. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief. They shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet the end shall be when? At the time appointed. So what this suggests is that these two kings are going to come together, and they are going to try to carry out deception and to maybe bring things to a conclusion. I don't know what they are trying to do. But God says their plans won't work out because the end is not at that time. It is at the time appointed. So all the machinations and the devices and the schemings of men, it won't prosper. Although it's mentioning these two kings in particular. But it won't succeed. Why? Because what they are planning on doing is not yet at the right time, because it's not the time of the end. Because the end is yet for a time appointed. Then in Daniel 11 and verse 35, it says, and some of those who have understanding shall fall to do what? To try them, to purge, to purify them, to make them white. Until when? Even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. All right, so God's people were going to be persecuted and be under pressure and trial even right up to the time of the end, because it couldn't end before, because the end is at an appointed time. So I wanted to make that point before we actually look at the time of the end. I wanted to make that point that the time of the end is specific. It's a time appointed by God. All right, let's go back to the time of the end now. We saw already Daniel 8 verse 17 where it says at the time of the end, Daniel's vision in chapter 8 would apply. I'm going to come back to this. Remember, I asked you to bring me back to it. I'm going to come back to it. In verse 19, it mentions it again. He said, I will make you know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. So the prophecy in Daniel 8 has to do with the very last end. The very last end. What does indignation mean? Let me see what it says in the NIV, a modern translation. Later in the time of wrath. The NASB. I like this better. At the final period of the indignation. Yeah, that is more like what the original says. What does indignation mean? World English Bible, indignation. New English Translation, wrath. All right. In the latter time of wrath, at the last period of wrath, the last period of the trouble. I'm going to inform you about what will happen in the last point of the trouble. That's what he's really saying. Daniel 8 and the 2300 days are talking about what will happen in the last moments of the trouble. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. He goes back and he mentions over again the end, the time of the end, at the time appointed. And he emphasizes it will be the last end. He doesn't even say it will be the end of the indignation, but the last end, right down at the very end. This is when this vision of Daniel 8, the 2300 days, this is when it applies. Again, that's kind of strange to me, because was it the last end of the indignation in 1844. And if you are somebody in the room who never had an Adventist background, you will wonder, why am I continuing to mention 1844? Well, most people in here come from an Adventist background. That's why I keep mentioning it, because an Adventist teach that the 2300 days ended in the year 1844. That's why I keep mentioning it. 1844 was almost 200 years ago. So if 1844 was the end, was when the vision applies, it means that the last end of the trouble took place in 1844. That is the point about it, that it makes it, to me, really untenable, unsatisfactory. Because I can't accept, you can't accept, nobody who reads the Bible can accept that the trouble came to an end in 1844. We have come to the end of these wonders. Everything is over. And we are just relaxing and floating along until Jesus comes, because there's no more trouble. We have gone already to the last end of the indignation. So, maybe I'm trampling upon some things that I have defended before, but I was looking more closely and I'm thinking I need to rethink some of these things. In Daniel 11 verse 27, again it says, and we looked at this, both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, they shall speak lies at one table, it shall not prosper, for the end shall be at the time appointed. Daniel 11:35, it is yet at the time appointed, they'll be purified and made white even to the time of the end. And then here are a couple others now that are more definite. Daniel 11 verse 40. At the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. So whenever the time of the end comes, the king of the south will push at him. And I believe the him is the king of the north. Some people say it's some other power, some third power. I don't believe so. I don't believe so. We would actually be twisting the context a whole lot to come to that conclusion. Anyway, at the time of the end, the king of the south will push at him, and at the time of the end, same time, the king of the north will come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, shall overflow and pass over. So, the final assault of the king of the north takes place at the time of the end. And at that time, from that point, you have 3.5 years until all these things come to an end. So it tells you all the things that the king of the north will do. And one of the final things he will do, he will plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Then he will come to his end. Now, as I said, in all of the prophecies, including Revelation, in all of the prophecies in Daniel, the last point of all the prophecies is the destruction of the fourth world power. That's the last point. I can show you that very quickly. If you go to Daniel, I mean, most of us are aware of it, but we are just reinforcing. 3, I'm coming to you in just a moment. In Daniel 2, the prophecy of the great image, it says, in the days of these kings, the feet of iron and clay, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. The stone smites the image on the feet, and the stone becomes a great mountain and fills the earth. The last end of the prophecy is the destruction of the fourth kingdom. If you go to Daniel 7, same thing. Go to Daniel 7 and it says, I beheld, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. That's the end of that prophecy. You go to Daniel 8, and it talks about the vision of the ram and the he-goat and the exceedingly great horn. And the end of that prophecy, it says down at the end of chapter 8, referring to the horn, he shall stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. The last power in all of the prophecies is destroyed, and that's basically the end of it. And then when you come to chapter 11, it's the same thing. He plants the tabernacles of his palace between the seas, and yet he comes to his end and nobody shall help him. So what I'm saying really is that this last power, we have good reason to believe it's always the same power. There are not two powers at the end exalting themselves and carrying on. It's one power, and in all cases he's broken by a divine hand. T3, is that Brother Tony? You can go ahead. Whoever T3 is, your hand is up. But you are muted. You need to unmute whoever that is.
It's 1-3.
Oh, 1-3. Okay, Brother Peter.
Yeah. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. What you're saying make a lot of sense, but then there's something that is bothering me. If the 2300 days, as we normally say, ended in 1844, and we said it started when the decree was given to go and rebuild Jerusalem, and normally we pencil it out and it falls perfectly. This 2300 days that you're talking about now, when would it begin, and how can we mark a point that it started? Just like how we could have done before when the decree was given.
Right. So I'm going to say what I said at the beginning, which is that this evening
The same question.
I'm pointing out discrepancies and asking questions. Okay, so the answers to those questions, I don't know. Maybe the original understanding is the correct one. But if it is, we need to find a way to interpret or to explain these questions. That's the point I'm making. So I'm really exposing us to the difficulties in the explanations we have. That's what I want to do. I want to show you reasons why we have to have questions. So maybe the questions have very good answers, but I have the questions because I don't see the very good answers at the moment. So that's what I'm saying, Brother Peter.
Okay, bro.
I believe that if we are exposed to the pros and the cons, we are better able to look at things in a balanced way, because remember, it's God who gives understanding. And remember, the book of Daniel is to be understood at the time of the end. There are still vital elements of this book that we don't understand or that we're not clear about. One of them is some of the time periods. Another one of them is the king of the north and the king of the south. Another one of them, as I pointed out, is why does the Bible say evenings and mornings? So those are some of the questions. Now, I promised that I would take some time to look at the 2300 days. But first of all, before we do that, let me just show you something here. All right, so these are all things that take place at the time of the end. And remember, the time of the end is not some vague period, because the angel says over and over, at the time appointed. It is yet for a time appointed. So the time of the end is a definite point in time that God has appointed. I want to emphasize that. So here are all the things that it says happen at the time of the end. Number one, the vision of Daniel 8 applies to the time of the end. We looked at this, but I'll look at it again quickly. In Daniel 8 and verse 17, is it? It says, he came near to where I stood, and he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. All right? The conclusion of the indignation, Daniel 8 and verse 19. He said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed, the end shall be. It has to do with the failed plans of the kings of the north and the south. They will sit at the same table, but their plans will not come to fruition, because it is yet for a time appointed, which is the time of the end. It's a time when the persecution of the saints will come to an end, because it says, some of them of understanding shall be purified, and they shall be purged until the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. At the time of the end, the next one, the king of the south, will disturb the king of the north, and the king of the north will attack him. Here's a critical one. How do we know when it's the time of the end? Daniel's book is unsealed. There are two things that we can look for to mark the time of the end. I would say one of them is when the king of the south attacks the king of the north. I mean, of course, Adventists say it happened in 1798. The unsealing of Daniel's book, and of course, Adventists say that happened in 1844. And that's interesting because there's a gap of, between 1798 and 1844, there's a gap of 40-something years. But God says the time of the end is for a time appointed. When the time comes, the southern king will attack the northern one. The book of Daniel will be fully understood. And it will be that the vision of Daniel 8, the 2300 days, will also apply. And I mean, I have to say, I believe that Adventists, they put together a good explanation of all of this. The problem is that their explanation is completely historical. It puts everything in the past, including the end of the wonders and the last end of indignation. Everything is in the past. And either they are right and everything is in the past, or if they are wrong, then everything is in the future. That's why it is a conundrum. It's a difficulty. There are challenges to both ideas, and there are pros. There are pros. There are things to support both ideas. Now, the last thing I want to look at is the 2300 days. Now, I've heard this explanation before, and I never paid much attention to it. But this morning I started looking at the Greek, the Hebrew. I started bringing up the Hebrew and looking at some of these words, and I was reminded of what I had heard, but I never paid much attention to it. But I'm going to bring it out to all of us this afternoon. Let me see, I probably should just use one window. Let me use one window because I need more space. All right, so we go to Daniel chapter 8. All right, and let's bring up the Hebrew. Now we go down to Daniel 8, and Daniel said, let me show you something. Daniel says he had a vision. The word vision, he had a vision, right? And if you look, the word for vision, if you look in that panel on the left at the top, hope you can see. The Hebrew word is kazon. Kazon. All right, and it means a sight. Yeah, pretty much a sight, something that he sees, right? So Daniel says he had a vision, a kazon. And then he says, I saw in a vision, same kazon. And he goes on to talk about, I saw in a vision. He uses the word again, and it's the same kazon. And then he goes on to tell about the thing that he saw. And let me show you. Let's go down to where it talks about vision again. And yeah, I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision? Again it talks about kazon, same word. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, evening, mornings, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the kazon and sought for the meaning, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. There's the word again. But this time, it's not kazon. Look at the panel, left at the top, you'll see a different word, the mare. Now, you know what I want to understand? Why is it that in two verses, side by side, there are two different words that are used? Now, because we are looking at this passage in English, and in English they give us the same word, vision. vision. It seems like it's talking about the same exact thing. But if you were speaking Hebrew or whatever language it was that was written here, you would know that it's not the same word. Daniel has seen a vision, a kazon. He has seen a kazon and is trying to understand it, and somebody says, Gabriel, make this man understand the mare. You would think it's two different things. It's like if it's the exact same thing, why would you use a different word? All the time from the top coming down, it's the kazon, the kazon, the kazon. And then finally when he says, Gabriel, make the man understand, the word that is used now is mare. Now I see your hand, Dario. I'm going to come to you in a moment. So let me go on looking at the word vision in this chapter, and we see if we can pick up anything else.
Can you tell us what mare means?
It's similar. It's similar. It says a view, the act of seeing. That's why they also translate it as vision. But clearly there's some slight difference, like when we talk about view or sight. In English there's a slight difference. You might talk about, some words have, I find it interesting sometimes when I'm with the brethren, for example in the German meeting, and I use 3 different English words that are slightly similar. Brother Oliver will say, I can't translate this because all of them is one word in Germany. But in English you might have 3 different words that have slight differences of meaning. And it's something like this happening here. You have 2 words that are basically they mean the same thing, but there are slight differences in meaning. So the angel uses a different word, and he's told, make this man to understand the mare. So he came near to where I stood, and when he came I was afraid. I fell upon my face, and he said, look what he says. He said, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the kazon. So he's gone back to kazon. The vision, the entire vision, has to do with the time of the end. But he has been told to make Daniel understand the mare. The mare is the problem, not the entire vision. All right, let's go on and see if we can find out anything else. And he said, behold, I will now make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. And he goes on to tell him about the kings of the Media and Persia, and so on. And then he comes down to his point now. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Therefore shut up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Now look at it. And the mare. The mare has to do with the evening and the morning. This is what he was told to make Daniel understand. The mare of the evening and the morning which was told is true. The 2300 evenings and mornings is true. Therefore shut up the kazon, shut up the vision, shut up the entire thing. Because everything is going to be after many days. But the part about the evening and the morning, the mare about the evening and the morning, is true. That's the part that he was told to explain to Daniel. And Daniel says, I, Daniel, fainted, and I was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, at the mare. I was astonished at the mare, but I didn't understand it. So it's striking that the angel is told to make Daniel understand the mare. Make this man understand the mare. That's the part of it that he was especially told to make Daniel understand. And then he comes down to the end and he says, this vision, this mare about the evening and the morning is true. So you have to shut up the entire vision because it has to do with many days in the future. The part of the vision that is really critical is the 2300 days. And Daniel says immediately he fainted and he was sick. But he says, I was astonished at the mare, the 2300 days. but I didn't understand it. So the angel seems to have failed in his duty because he doesn't understand. Daniel doesn't understand what he came to make Daniel understand. When you go back to Daniel chapter 9, it says Daniel goes back to studying the scriptures because he's confused by this Mare, 2300 days. And he goes back to studying the book of Jeremiah, and he understands that Israel, the Jews were to be in captivity for 70 years. So what is this angel telling him about 2300 days, 2300 evenings, mornings? He doesn't understand. And he goes to fasting and prayer. And when he's there praying and fasting, he says, while I was speaking in verse 21, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision, what's that word? In the kazon at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. He informed me and talked with me and said, "Oh, Daniel, I'm now come forth to give thee skill and understanding." Daniel says the same person that he saw in the kazon at the beginning, the vision at the beginning. So the angel now says, at the beginning of your supplications, the commandment came forth, and I have come to show you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. What word is it for the vision? It's a Mare. Now, I don't know if you're following the implications, because the angel, Daniel says, the man I saw in the vision at the beginning came back to me to give me understanding. Why does he come back? Because Daniel is worried about the 2300 days. He's concerned about the Mare. And so he says, while he was praying, he sees the same angel coming back that he had seen in the kazon, the vision at the beginning. And the angel says, "Look here, from you started to pray, a message came forth, and now I want you to consider the Mare, consider the 2300 days." So the point I'm making is that the key element of this vision of Daniel chapter 8 is the 2300 days. And this evening I said I was asking questions more than giving answers, because there is a lot to give us reason to believe that this 2300 days points to a time period that ends in 1844. There's a lot to give us that conclusion. But there are the problems. Why does it say evening and morning? And when it says it applies to the time of the end, how could the time of the end be 200 years ago? Because when the time of the end comes, we only have 1260 days. We have 3.5 years until the completion, and it has been 200 years. So those are some of the difficulties that I am seeing. All right, so in this evening, I put all the difficulties that I see, are many of them, before all of us. This week and in the future, I'm going back to study to try to harmonize, if I possibly can. I know it can be harmonized because it's the Word of God. But again, I'm remembering that God Himself has closed up the book. There are certain things that cannot be understood before the time of the end. But at least if you understand what I'm saying this evening, you can see why the whole subject is so challenging. I hope you have been able to understand. Brother Ian, go ahead.
Could it be the Mare means the mystery in the vision? Because it seemed like he's only going to tell him about something that he doesn't understand. Anytime it refers to the vision, he's always going to explain a vision that Daniel don't seem to understand. Could that vision be synonymous to the mystery view? What you
Well, I
see?
mean, we could take that point of view. I mean, the word itself does not mean mystery.
No, but it seemed like every time that he mentioned throughout the whole reading, every time he mentions he's going to explain anything to do with the vision, he uses the Mare. So
well, when he's going to explain anything to do with the time,
okay, well,
it's particularly having to do with the 2300 days that he refers to as the Mare. If you go back and look at it, the vision, the entire vision is referred to as a kazon. Okay? Over and over it talks about the whole vision as a kazon. But then he says, make this man understand the mare. And the mare is the part having to do with the vision of the evenings and the mornings. Remember, he says the mare of the evenings and the mornings is true. So the mare has to do with the evening and the morning.
Yeah, I'm going to say the word mare seems to apply to something that is not understood.
It
Because
literally means,
Daniel don't understand the 2,300 days.
yeah, it literally means, mare literally means the thing you have seen. Similar to kazon. We could say, based on what I'm looking at, it seems to be pointing in that direction, but you can't put that meaning in the word because the meaning isn't there. So it will be just an assumption that is being made based on how it is used in the passage, right? So I don't know enough about language. I've never heard anybody explain well enough to explain why it's mare and kazon, why two different words that mean almost the same thing. But I know that the angel specifically pointed out that the 2,300 evenings and mornings, he referred to that as the mare. And when he came to Daniel, he was told, the voice said, Gabriel, make this man understand the mare. He meant make this man understand the 2,300 evenings and mornings. Yeah. Sister Suzanne?
He immediately goes on to start explaining that by the 70-week
Yes.
prophecy, which pertains to Jesus. And that really can't pertain to anything else, unless you're going to split those days up, like some other doctrines have done. But
That's why I said that the evidence that takes us to 1844 is very strong.
yeah,
Because, as you say, it immediately begins to explain about the 70 weeks, which we understand to be a part of the 2,300 days. But the mystery remains, why did God say evenings and mornings? That's a massive question that I think we still need an answer for. Because there's no other place in the prophecies where a day for a year is expressed in that way. And God doesn't do anything by accident. So there has to be a reason for that. And that's one of those questions that we are praying, we are hoping that God will give us an answer for.
unless it was specific to tying into that 2,300 days, that this description didn't mean something else. But anyway.
Yeah, there's an answer, and we'll find it, or it will be revealed to us by His grace. Daria, go ahead.
Okay, just a suggestion. Could it be two suggestions I had? I don't know. Could it be evening and morning representing double the time? Or could it be that the 2,300 days are symbolic?
Yeah, I've thought of all of that, but symbolic of what? How do you symbolize 2,300? It's a very specific number. And if you double the time, you'd end up, whether you double it or you halve it, it still doesn't help, because a lot of people say you halve it, because if you have an evening sacrifice and a morning sacrifice, that's one day. So they say it's 1,150 instead of 2,300, 1,150 days. It doesn't help, because it doesn't fit any time period. So, we can juggle it around and speculate, but I always know that when things fit, it will go click. It will just fit into place like a hand in a glove, and you will see it. So I just want to believe that either the Lord has not, either something has not happened yet, or there's something that is in plain sight that we just haven't connected yet. But when it fits, it will fit beautifully. That's what I believe.
Yeah,
Brother
David,
Peter, go ahead.
how do you spell the
Yeah,
word
brother
now?
David, I had to step away for a while. So I don't know if
One
you had,
second, Peter. What were you're asking for? Spelling of what?
The word Maui.
Mareh.
Thank you.
Yes, Brother Peter.
yeah, I had to step away for a while. So I didn't hear whether or not you had mention a thing that you heard. You said you heard a explanation and you did not give much thought to it. What was that?
It had to do with the you'll have to watch the video if you'd got none of it. I'm saying that there are two words that refer to vision. One of them is katzon, and the other one is mare. And the way they are used in Daniel chapter 8 is striking, because the mare is used to refer to the 2300 days, while the other word is used to refer to the entire vision, and it is significant. So that's what I was explaining.
Okay, all right.
Yes. Sister Jema, go ahead.
If you guys can just bear with me. Okay. When we read the verse where it says, and I saw, it's in Daniel 12:7, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters, and he raised up his right hand and left hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever. The verse that came to my mind is actually found in Deuteronomy 32, which is the original Song of Moses. And but yeah, please try to follow me, because I know it's not as fluid when I'm trying to present it, but it makes a lot of sense in my head. But when we see that expression in Deuteronomy, it's actually God Himself saying in Deuteronomy 32:40, which is the original Song of Moses, and in Revelation 15, it says they sing the Song of Moses. So in my mind, there's definitely a connection here. So when God says, "For I lift my hand to heaven and say, I live forever," this man clothed in linen in Daniel, who's raising up his hand to heaven, swearing to the one that lives forever, it reminds me of when God Himself does this in the Song of Moses, when Moses is stating that long, I don't know what you want to call it, monologue for his people. And when we look at the entire Deuteronomy 32 and the Song of Moses, obviously it's talking about Moses giving a warning to his people right before he's going to die, but also right before they're about ready to enter the land of Canaan, which represents for us in our time right before we will enter the inheritance of the promised land, which is in heaven. So, and the entire time in the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32, it's talking about a judgment. And it keeps reminding me of Daniel and Revelation, because we know it's about judgment and the final end. And in Deuteronomy 32:4, it talks about God's righteousness. All His ways are just, righteous, and upright. Deuteronomy 32 describes how His people went through idolatry, and they worshiped devils. And then in Revelation, it talks very specifically about, let me backtrack. Deuteronomy 32:16-17 talks about His people sacrificed unto devils, not to God. Revelation 9:20 says these people did not repented not of various different things. They didn't repent, including not worshiping devils. So it's kind of talking about the same thing, just Revelation goes into details. And then in Deuteronomy, when it says that 32:20, I will hide my face from them, God is withdrawing His protection. He's even mocking the people, saying, let's see if your rock will save and protect you. And we know in the end, God's protection in Revelation will be withdrawn. I know we're studying Daniel, but right now, but it's just bringing to my mind how very clearly, when we're talking about Daniel 12, it's talking about the very end. And when we look at Revelation, I'm sorry, Daniel 11 as well, we're talking about the end. It couldn't have been 200 years ago or in 1844 or whenever other people want to place this. In Deuteronomy, it's talking about, for example, in 32:35, vengeance is mine, I will repay. Revelation, in Revelation, we know that the saints below the altar are saying, "How long, O Lord, must we wait for this vengeance?" Deuteronomy 32:41, 42 says, When he whets his glittering sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, he will render judgment. And in Deuteronomy 42, it says, I will revenge the blood. He will revenge the blood of his servants. So it's like he's answering the cry of this how long, that he's going to revenge the blood of his servants, that in Revelation these martyrs are crying out. And Moses stated all this right before they were going to enter Canaan. And in Revelation 15, they specifically talk about right before the plague, they sang the song of Moses, the servants of God, and the song of the Lamb. So the song of Moses is like a parallel to Song of Moses. And why do I keep bringing up Revelation when we're talking about Daniel? It's because in Daniel 12:1, it says Michael stands up. And we know Michael stands up in Revelation at the end. And Michael standing up is the same chapter in Daniel as when the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of river, held up his right hand and left hand unto heaven and swear by him that liveth forever. And then he goes into for a time, times and a half. And I have to be honest, I don't understand the details of those times and a half, 2,300 days, 35 more. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you historically at what exact year those things start. But my point is that the whole debate about whether it's talking about the time of the very end or not, or right before Christ comes, is very clear to me when we're looking at the different things that come up in Revelation and Daniel that are similar. And then when I look at the original Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32, yes, these are things that God did during the time of Moses and the Old Testament, but clearly it's a prophecy because God is saying to Moses, and right before Moses died, after he says this monologue, then God tells him to go up to the mountain, and that's when Moses dies. But Moses was allowed to see before him all that God had planned. So his encounter with God, when God showed him all this, was the time of the end, not the people entering Canaan. So I think it's very clear in the whole panorama of things that Daniel 11, Daniel 12 is talking about the very end of time.
Yeah, the comparison with Deuteronomy 32 is very interesting, very interesting. Yeah, when you go ahead and you do parallels with Daniel 12 and Revelation, several places in Revelation, it's hard to say that it's coincidence, you know. The word connections, the imagery connections, God is trying to make the connection there, I think. So it's very interesting. And
not only that, Brother David, it actually says in Revelation 15:3, they sing the song of Moses. They sing the song of victory. I mean, it's not like I'm just bringing up the song of Moses out of nowhere. It actually says in Revelation, and that's right before the seven plagues, because then it talks about the angels who have the seven vials ready. And then you go into the pouring out of the seven vials.
it's something we can get our teeth into. We can definitely go back and look at that a little bit more closely. I think a lot of our deep-rooted ideas may be shaken up a bit when we start to really understand better. But I want to say before we close, you know, I know that when it comes to the Bible, we want to be certain of where we stand. We want to have to be able to go out and say, this is what it means. But I would say that before we get to that place, we also have to make sure that we understand the corners and the hidden places in what we are teaching. And because that is the reason why there is so much erroneous doctrine in the world. It's because people take half-developed ideas and they set them in stone. And I mean, I've been guilty of that, but I believe that if we take the time and even do as we are doing this evening. Examine the difficulties, examine the problems, examine the obstructions. It is helpful. I know this is hard for some people. I remember when we used to have Bible studies of this nature in our fellowship. A lot of the people, most often the ladies wanted to be somewhere else. So I'm hoping we're not driving anybody away, because what we are doing is really opening up what the Bible is saying and showing the difficulties. We have 60 persons in the room this evening. If 60 people put their heads to it, it's possible that to some of us the Lord might give deeper understanding, you know. So it's good that we all are exposed to it. I know that we have had some ideas shared from different people, the people who give their input, Ian, Sister Jema, Sister Jess, Brother Kip, and all the others who ask questions or make an input. Sometimes your question is not, there are obstructions in the way of what you're suggesting, but it helps. It helps. Every time you come upon a suggestion and you see that it doesn't fit, you can eliminate something and keep on looking. And I like what the Lord says. He says, many shall run to and fro. What he means is that they run to and fro through the book of Daniel. And the reason they are running to and fro is because they don't understand. And because it's so challenging, they are battering their heads and they are taking it and going through and saying, no, that doesn't fit, let's go again. And they are working at it. For me, it is an exciting journey. I don't mind that. The more I see that things might not fit, the more excited I become. Because it means that there is something amazing waiting that the Lord will bring out to us. So I'm just saying that so nobody gets discouraged.